Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to NASA's Johnson Space Center for today's post-mission management team briefing. Joining us once again is Leroy Kane. He's the Deputy Manager of the Space Shuttle Program, and of course he also chairs the on-orbit mission management team meeting, which is joint with the International Space Station Program and all the other elements associated with Atlantis' mission to the ISS. Leroy will have some opening comments, and then we'll take questions here and out on the phone bridge. So with that, I'll turn it over to Leroy.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. It is my pleasure to be back here with you this afternoon, and it's also my pleasure to tell you we've had another very good 24 hours in space. All of the MPLM operations went extremely smoothly. The crew continues to be ahead of the timeline in pretty much every activity that they're executing on board, and of course, same thing with the team on the ground. The Spacewalk is tomorrow, of course, and we look forward to that. And so the crew is finishing it up. They'll do their final normal evening before Spacewalk kind of preparations on board right now. In the MMT today, it was a kind of a big day for us. We had a couple of more significant items to disposition, and then we, of course, got our overall status and progress as we normally do. Where the +1 day is concerned, the Space Station Program did review that in the IMMT this morning, and they brought in the entire list of activities that they would like to complete in a +1 day. That list will change. They will iterate on that, but suffice it to say it is a significant list of activities, and it's very clear to see that it will not be a problem for us to keep the crew busy and doing very productive and useful and much needed work on the station. So we reviewed the cryogenics, consumables from a shuttle standpoint, and with the cryo H2 the limiting consumable, we are currently at 1 day, 6 hours of margin, and that margin is expected to continue to grow somewhere in the order of 1 to 2 hours a day for the remainder of the dock period. So we went around the room and talked to each one of the projects and elements and the members of the mission management team and reviewed the +1 day recommendation, and everyone was go to add a day. I personally didn't have any problem seeing that this is exactly the right thing to do on this mission. There's a lot of good work that we can help the Space Station Program with. If we had more time to give them, we probably would do that as well. And so I approved the +1 day, and so we're currently at 13 + 0 + 2 days is our mission as it stands today, and I expect to have somewhere between 6 and 8 hours of margin above that by about this time tomorrow. The other item that we talked a lot about was the DAT results. The damage assessment team came in and gave us their results, and they only had 5 items, a total of 5 items on the orbiter that they were reviewing, and 4 of those items are associated with blankets, and they're very, very minor items. The one other item was a tile damage site, and it was relatively minor also. And so they were able to recommend that we do not need any focused inspection. When I was here yesterday, I think I told you that we have the leading edge support system team, the wing leading edge team, that is to say the folks that worry about the wing leading edge and the nose cap, all of the RCC, the things that we inspect on flight day 2. They have no issues. And so while we did not have our final overall assessment of all of the TPS and the MMT today, I anticipate we'll do that tomorrow, and I'm anticipating no issues. But in the meantime, we did approve the decision for no focused inspection. So there will be no focused inspection needed. And so that's really good news. And obviously that is something that the mission ops team will then can otherwise use that time on board. The thing I'd like to say, I guess, at this point is when you look at the performance of the vehicle, to include really all of the STS elements on this mission, ET-138, our final tank, and all of the work that has gone into the work that we've done on the external tank to preclude the generation of debris. And if you look at sort of the proof in the pudding now, the vehicle Atlantis on orbit, and the minimal damage almost can't even say minimal damage because it's almost non-existent damage, to only have one site on the underside tiles that has any kind of indication at all, and in and of itself, it is extremely minor. I think speaks volumes for the work that this team has done in the last several years. And we have been tireless and very committed at ensuring that we continued to improve and that we continued to evolve and we continued to learn and we continued to be determined that each and every flight was going to be safer than the next flight. And we were very determined to finish strong. And I think at least for the launch, ascent, and orbit insertion portion of this mission, the performance itself of the vehicle, the systems on orbit now, and as well as the teams on the ground, I think speaks volumes for itself. And so a very hearty congratulations was in order at the MMT, and so that's some of what I talked to the team about today. I wanted them to pause and think about all of the hard work that they put into these systems in the last several years, and they can feel very, very proud of the performance of this vehicle. So with that, we did review a couple other items in the MMT. The SRBs at the Cape, we're experiencing some weather in Florida, and I look out and I see some folks who know exactly what I'm talking about. We are having some rain and some lightning, and so that delays our operations, the slip operations, as well as leading on to open assessment of the boosters. So all of that has been delayed about a day. It was reported that it's still possible that we might get the SRB video data from the boosters sometime tomorrow, and of course if we do, then we bring that and process it, and Kyle and the public affairs team will have that available to you as soon as they're able to catalog all of that information and get it out to you. So we're anxious to see it, and we know that you all are anxious to see it as well, and get that to you just as soon as we can. But just a little bit of delay there because of weather. I'm much happier to delay slip ops due to weather than launch any day. So in the area of systems and just kind of other items, we talked about GPC-3 a little bit, and I told you that I thought that was going to be a switch tease kind of item. And it turns out the team brought up the GPC. They did a re-IPL and a dump, which is to say they essentially rebooted it, dumped it, looked at all the error logs, looked at all the data, and GPC-3 is perfectly healthy. There's nothing wrong with it. We don't consider it an anomaly. We're not tracking it as an anomaly. It was a switch tease item, and so that one's cleared. When we took the MPLM out of the bay, there was one micro switch on one of the payload retention latch mechanisms, and it was micro switch A on Perla 3 failed to indicate open when in fact the latch was open, and that's a redundant micro switch. There's no intended use for that micro switch or that aspect of the latch system for the remainder of the mission. It won't impact anything when we go to put the MPLM back in the payload bay. And in fact, even if for some far out contingency reason we wanted to then take it back out of the payload bay, it's no issue even if we had a problem with the other micro switch. So no issue whatsoever on the Perla. With respect to the conjunction that I talked to you about yesterday, and I said that we didn't have good state vectors, and the perturbations during rendezvous and docking was playing into that. In fact, those perturbations have essentially moved the vehicles enough such that there's no issue with the conjunction whatsoever. So we don't have a conjunction anymore. It's off of our radar screen in terms of anything that we need to go work or worry about for tomorrow. So in summary, as I said, the crew on orbit, the team on the ground are continuing to perform at a very high level. I couldn't be more pleased in terms of the progress of the mission so far and the results. And of course, the performance of all of the hardware and the systems in the vehicle is, again, a huge tribute to the team around the country that has worked so hard on these vehicles during the course of this program. Two items that we talked about from the MMT, the two major items, of course, we approved the +1 day, and there's no focused inspection required. And so with that, we are looking forward to the spacewalk tomorrow and another great day in orbit. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, as usual, we'll start here and then go out to the other centers and phone bridge, and you'll have to come up to the microphone so everybody out on the network can hear you, and we'll start with Mark.
Oh, thank you, Mark Carreau for Aviation Week. I think I can add, but 1 day is probably all you can extend this mission. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Gina.
Gina Sinceri, ABC News. So what will the crew do with that extra day? I mean, were they already backed up as it was? What will happen on that day?
Gina, they were not backed up. In fact, they've been ahead of the timeline. Of course, we haven't really started the transfer activities in earnest yet. We just now have the MPLM on board the station. We have the hatch open, and we have the crew beginning to work those, the preliminary aspects of the transfers from the MPLM. We had done several hours of mid-deck transfer by this time, by the time of the MMT today. But there are additional unstow, unpack, and then put in the right place on station kind of activities that will be very helpful for the space station. They have a couple of systems items that they're going to ask for some help working. They have their constituents analyzer that's had a failure, and they're going to ask for some help working on that. And in fact, we have an entire list. Most of it is in space station systems kind of language that I'm not as well versed in as some other people are, but we can certainly publish that for folks and show you the kinds of things that we're planning to work on. But as I talked about yesterday, it's certainly some unpack and stowage on the station side items, and setup and configuration of some of the cargo that we're bringing up. It's certainly some systems, some of the smaller systems, but certainly in any case items that they want to work off in the near term, in addition to some general job jar items on the space station that they could use some help with before our four-person crew leaves. So they had some 70 items in total, and so they are off prioritizing that list with the mission operations team and the crew on board. And by the time we get to the point where those things would be implemented, we'll have a very good prioritized list. And as I was yesterday, I'm even more confident today, if that's possible, that we won't have any trouble at all keeping our crew busy.
Philip Sloss with NASASpaceflight.com. Just to follow Mark's question a little bit, how close would you get in terms of cryo margins to, how close would you approach to an additional day, or are you expecting them to sort of stabilize at some point?
What I expect is we'll end up toward the end of the docked mission, somewhere just maybe above a half of a day. So we're not going to be anywhere near being able to go an additional day, between now and when we undock. And so I feel very fortunate we were able to get this day. It required us to launch on time, essentially, on the initial launch attempt. It required us to have our power predictions be pretty much right down the line in terms of what we were expecting. And as you can see, we knew we were going to be close to a day, and given that we're into our third to fourth day on orbit, and we're only 6 hours above that, the predicts were pretty good. So I don't expect much more than about another half a day by the time we undock, maybe slightly more than that.
Thanks. And then for the end of mission opportunities on the 21st, do you know, looking ahead, might be looking ahead a little bit too far, but do you know if there's going to be any orbit adjust that you'll need to do to bring in like cross range or anything like that into Kennedy?
Preliminarily, there isn't, but we'll let the flight dynamics team evaluate that over the course of the next week. I can tell you that the first opportunity on the 21st is just a few minutes before 6 a.m. Eastern time, and for a Kennedy Space Center landing first opportunity, and that would be, I think it's somewhere on the order of 40 minutes before sunrise. And there will be a second opportunity that day as well. And neither of those, I think, at this time, we think we need an orbit adjust to bring in, and cross range is good.
Thanks.
Yeah, David Hirsch with NHK. Could you, in practical terms, give an idea of why the cryogenics is a constraining factor when considering adding a day, and how you do your calculations?
Sure, I'd be happy to. The cryogenics, of course, the consumable that we use to provide power, basically the reactants that allow the fuel cell to run, and the fuel cells provide power to the buses on orbit for the shuttle power systems. The They are consumable. We have other consumables. We have the LIO, the CO2 scrubbing consumable. We have N2. We have O2. In this case, we have H2 is the limiting consumable in the cryogenics. And so we know how much power, therefore reactants required to generate that power, we need for the systems that we plan to have operating for the remainder of our time on orbit while we're docked. And so we can compute exactly how much reactants we're going to need. And when we run that out to include the use of the plus 2 days at the end of the mission, so we were at 12 plus 0 plus 2, that cryogenic calculation, the consumables calculation, assumes that we have those 2 days as well, of course, because we need to have those 2 days in the bank. And so it's just a pure, straight consumables calculation based on, if you think about a spreadsheet that shows you which systems are powered on when and for what duration and what their kilowatt hour requirements are, and then have that for each day of the mission, and then it's simply a matter of calculating the cryogenics required to generate that much power in the fuel cells.
Dan Bergano with USA Today. You talked a little bit about what orbital adjustment may or may not be needed for the extra day. Could you just go into a little more detail about what sort of planning takes place now, given an extra day? Is it already mostly done and you just have to fill in some blanks, or is there a bit of a scramble to account for all that?
Sure. It's, well, it won't be a scramble because the teams plan for this eventuality. In this case, this is something we were hoping to be able to do before we launched. So what you'll see happen now is the flight planners will generate the plus 1 day flight plan. This day will be added after what was and what will remain flight day 8 in this flight plan. And you'll see a few items move ahead of that and a few items move behind it as a function of which tasks on the space station program list that we implement on which days and exactly what the priority of those are. So there'll be some puts and takes to that. There'll be some iteration of that, but certainly the initial publication of the quote plus 1 day timeline is, I'd be surprised if not already being reviewed by the flight control team for uplink to the crew for consideration. So again, it'll be iterated on, but we iterate on the nominal timeline every day. And so it's really not a big delta for the team. In particular, in this case, they had an expectation it was coming, so they were already looking ahead at which days we would slightly move which things around, which things might move ahead of the what was Flight Day 8 and which things might go on the other side of it. So it's a fairly straightforward thing. The team is very well versed in doing this, and so it should go about like that over the course of the next couple days.
Eric Berger with the Houston Chronicle. You've used the word flawless a couple times to talk about this mission, and really from the launch day forward, it's just been really smooth. You had the lightning strike issue that you were able to investigate very quickly and clear that, when in the past it's taken more time, and you had a clean launch, and it just seems like the shuttle program is really a well-oiled machine right now. It looks like that from the outside. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the mood among your team, or among the people, a lot of whom are going to be losing their jobs. Is this bittersweet that you've sort of built the program up to this point where it's really moving along very efficiently? You're getting the cleanest vehicles ever. You're doing these long, complex missions, and you're performing them, like, again, to outside observers, it looks easy to us. So talk about the mood of people sort of dealing with those two situations.
Okay, sure. It is true. Of course, just on launch day alone, we had the weather that we were challenged with. We had the GOX vent hood hold us at 31 seconds, and the team did an outstanding job working through that and allowing us to have enough launch window and performance remaining to be able to go fly Friday. We had several balloon issues that as it turns out, many more than we've had on some previous launch attempts. Every single item, while in and of itself may not have been all that significant, could have potentially kept us from launching on Friday. But the team worked through all these things seamlessly, and that continues to be the case through our time on orbit here as we sit here on Flight Day 4. The team has been, as I've mentioned, very committed to this idea of finishing strong. And it's not just a mantra for us. If you look at the performance of this vehicle and of the previous several vehicles, you can see that it's proof in the pudding that we've been putting our nose to the grindstone and trying to make good on our word of finishing strong. And I think maybe more importantly than the mood right now, which is certainly very much, I cannot tell a difference when I walk around the control room, when I'm in the mission management team, and when we're executing, I cannot tell a difference in that any of this is going on relative to a last mission kind of scenario. Undoubtedly we'll be able to post wheel stop, and that is to be expected. We're all human beings, and there are aspects of our lives that will affect us in ways that will be different for individuals. But I think, again, more importantly, what I would say is that this team has a tremendous amount of momentum right now. And our intention is to leverage that momentum, leverage the skill base that we have, leverage the lessons that we will take away from the shuttle program and play those things forward in a very big, pronounced way as we move forward in the development of a new spacecraft, a new rocket, new capabilities, and new systems, and new infrastructure to go around that. I feel very optimistic about our ability to do that. The team is obviously committed to the task at hand, and that is the mission that we have on orbit right now. But when we're done, I think one of the things that is going to benefit the agency a great deal and benefit the nation is we're going to seed out this shuttle team into the other activities in the space community, whether it be commercial, whether it be the things internal to NASA that the agency has put forward as the next step for us to do in the overall agency vision. Having this shuttle team be seeded out and immersed in all of those activities, I think is going to pay huge dividends to our ability to go forward and succeed on those respective endeavors. I feel very strongly about that. I know the team members are looking forward to that as well. And I think that is the thing that's on my mind when I'm not thinking about the mission that we have in orbit right now. So it's not on my mind very much right now, but it will be on my mind post wheel stop. And it will be my intent to do everything I can to help us take this team and push it out into the various aspects of the ongoing development activities that we have, both in and outside the agency. And I think that is going to be a huge part of the reason why we will succeed in those subsequent activities.
Irene.
Hi, Irene Klotz with Reuters. Speaking of future systems, can you just give us a little inventory of what's available from shuttle program that you're not retiring, that you're keeping for possible use for the SLS, and also if the decision is made to go with a system like that, and you're going to use these shuttle main engines, does that mean that you're going to restart production of tanks, and where do you see some of this migration from existing system to next generation? Thanks.
Okay, Irene. It's very much a work in progress. There are some items of the STS system, you mentioned the space shuttle main engines, that we envision being part of at least the initial phases of the future development programs. And so all along, that's one item that we kind of anticipated might be used in next generation vehicle development. And so we've kind of planned for them to be preserved in that regard, the space shuttle main engines and their associated ground support equipment and spares and things of that nature. Now, we have had to stop asking the vendors to make parts and spares and that kind of thing. But there's a lot of space shuttle main engine logistical support available to us just as we know it today on the shelf, so to speak. And so that's one area where we're preserving and going to be able to play forward the main engines in some way, shape, or form. There are other main propulsion system elements, subsystems, plumbing parts, valves, things of that nature that we're anticipating will be asked to keep in a preserved state, if you will. And so those items, we're continuing to build a spreadsheet for all of those things. In the booster world, obviously, there's a lot of discussion about the next generation vehicles and the utilization of similar booster hardware. And so similarly, some of the things that we have that we use to process some of the booster hardware, we're going to preserve until further notice and to the extent we're able to, until things get more firmed up in terms of the architecture going forward. So I can't give you an exact list today, quite frankly, because it is a moving target. But there's a whole group of folks that are working on that. It is, in fact, what they are working on day in, day out, and they will be for the next several months. And so in the meantime, we have identified the things that we're absolutely not going to use going forward. And those would be very shuttle and orbiter specific items that you're mostly aware of already. And if you think about things here at the Johnson Space Center that were very shuttle, orbiter, and orbiter specific, if you will, like simulators and subsystem trainers and things that you would only use if you were going to train somebody to fly the space shuttle. Obviously, those things are being accessed, and we're trying to make the best use of those by getting them out to the academic world, in some cases to industry, in some cases to areas where folks can do evaluation and test, and they can learn. They can be used as learning instruments. So it's a wide range. It's a very, very gangly topic because the shuttle program is huge. But to your specific question, I hope I've answered it with respect to some of the things that we think we are going to be asked to continue to preserve, and we'll know more about that in the next few months, I think.
Thanks. Just one quick follow-up. I think with one of the pre-launch press conferences, I'm sorry, I can't remember who was telling us this, but there was a letter or something that the shuttle Atlantis was not to be dispensed, or was pending a letter. I don't remember which way the action went, but what is the status of for Atlantis, and also, I'm sorry, I meant Endeavour, for Endeavour and also for Atlantis when it returns, as far as it being released to the museums that they've been promised to?
It is Endeavour, and there was some discussion and some requests back and forth from headquarters for us to not go beyond down mission processing on Endeavour until we had such memo. I don't think we've gotten that yet, but I think we've gotten word that we should expect it, and so we intend that we're going to be able to go beyond down mission processing and into the preparation for the museum where Endeavour is concerned. Atlantis, of course, will go into the normal down mission processing and will be saved, and then it'll go right into its preparation for exhibit at the Kennedy Space Center in the visitor center area that they have established there. So that's the status of those vehicles. And again, I think at this point we're fully anticipating that once we get to the point of being at the end of down mission processing for 105, we'll continue right on beyond that, just as what had originally been intended for us to do.
Okay, let's go to the Kennedy Space Center. Well, we'll come back, Bill, if you want. Okay. Let's go to KSC for, I think there's one question or two down at the Kennedy Space Center.
One question. This is Marcia Dunn of the Associated Press. You mentioned, and it's been pretty apparent, that the crew's been running ahead of schedule almost since they got into orbit, yet it's the smallest crew in decades for the shuttle. I'm just wondering how you reconcile that. How can 4 people be ahead of schedule when it usually takes a crew of 6 or 7?
I don't know. I'm very happy about it, obviously, and it will require some post-mission debriefing for us to totally put that story together. Of course, in all seriousness, Marcia, part of the answer is the mission design was done with the understanding that it would be 4 people versus 6 or 7. So it's not as though in all of the activities that the 4-person crew is doing on board, they're doing everything literally that a 6 or 7-person crew is doing. That just isn't the case. But at any rate, I'm very happy about it. And I guess the truth is I probably don't have to reconcile it. But we'll just take it as it is, and we'll hope it continues through the rest of the mission.
Anything else, Marcia? Okay, how about the...
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. I think, Todd, are you on the phone bridge from Florida today?
Yes, I am. Thanks a lot, Kyle. I was just wondering, Leroy, what your thoughts are as you approach what will be the last EVA in the shuttle era. Even though it's being done by folks from the station, it is the last EVA of the shuttle era. And how far you guys have come since the beginning of station assembly and in fact, preparation for the beginning of station assembly.
Well, Todd, I similar to my thoughts and my sentiments as we did the final launch and the final rendezvous and proximity operations and docking and the payload, the MPLM berthing. Tomorrow will be the final planned spacewalk that we do with an orbiter present, albeit with the station crew, as you mentioned. I just continue to feel a great sense of accomplishment for this team, and that's what I tried to reiterate and pass on to the team in the mission management team today. And in that case, it was reflecting on the performance of the vehicle, and there's many more things beyond that they should and are deserving of feeling a great sense of accomplishment for. So that's my take on it. And there are no surprises here. And again, it's a tribute to the team that we're able to execute in this fashion. And the vehicle performance has been as good as it is because of the preparation of the vehicles on the ground, no doubt. And so, we have come a long way since we first started doing spacewalks in the assembly of the space station. And that's the other thing that I would say in terms of playing things forward from the shuttle program as we wind down the program. There are a lot of lessons learned from the shuttle that I intend and I think the agency can get great benefit from as we move forward. And so a lot of folks like to look back, way back, before the shuttle first flew and talk about, it was billed as a cheap, routine, frequent access to low Earth orbit, and to include assembly of a space station and to include some other things. Of course, those folks only knew what they knew then. They were at a certain place on a learning curve with respect to operating in low Earth orbit. And nothing can be taken away from them. They were making plans based on their best experience. And of course, we know a lot more now than what we did 135 flights ago, certainly than what we did before STS-1. And we can talk about a lot of different aspects of lessons learned from the shuttle as we go forward. I've heard also some discussion over the years about in other areas of development, we don't want to do it like shuttle. And I would my comment to that is primarily that there's a lot to be learned from shuttle, and we ought to take the things that we know and understand work well, and we ought to build on those things, and that is absolutely, I think, what we intend to do. And for my part in it, that would certainly be my focus, is to take as much of the benefit of what we learned going forward. And it's not really just about the shuttle, it's about the capability that was provided. You can talk about the operations of the shuttle. You can talk about what we've learned in terms of operating the shuttle and operating around complex robotic and spacewalk operations at the space station. you can talk about how we evolved the shuttle to use it not only as a platform for science, for Space Hab and Space Lab, et cetera, but the way we evolved it to fly missions, to deploy satellites, to capture satellites and repair them and redeploy them, to assemble a space station. The benefit that we got in terms of the Mir docking and the Mir missions that we did, most of which Atlantis did, by the way. There's a whole realm of lessons that we have very well documented, and I think we will absolutely get the greatest benefit from those, and that will be part of the greatest benefit that the shuttle provides going forward is being able to launch off of those lessons learned and being able to really leverage that in new development of new capability. So finally, Todd, we certainly have come a long way since the first spacewalk that we did in a station assembly mission. It would take me much longer to go into the details of all of those areas, but I hope I've answered your question in terms of, in general, kind of the sentiment in that regard.
Yeah, thanks very much, Leroy, and that's all for me, Kyle.
Okay, thanks. We're back here for any wrap-ups. Bill, do you still have a question? Okay, anybody else? All right, a couple of quick programming notes. The crew heads to bed again about 6 o'clock today. We'll start the flight day highlights package at 8 p.m. Central and on the hour, every hour as usual. We'll also replay the Launching Our Dreams Space Shuttle program video. If you haven't seen that, that'll air at 10 p.m. Central Time. And of course, the lone planned spacewalk that Leroy outlined for you begins about 7:45 a.m. tomorrow. And it's a 6.5-hour planned spacewalk, and that will be followed by a mission status briefing following the spacewalk with the flight director on the station side and EVA officer to detail what happened during the EVA. That's at 3:30 tomorrow afternoon. And of course, all that's on the television schedule, and we're working feverishly to build a new TV schedule with the extra day added into it. That'll be revision E. So look for that either late tonight or first thing in the morning. With that, we'll thank Leroy. We'll be back later in the flight with another MMT briefing when we get closer to focused or late inspection activities. And we'll thank everybody for coming. We'll head back to mission control and back to space. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Josh Keeley.
I'm Bill Hebner.
I'm Ian Anchondo. And I'm Bobby Jarvis. We are the Team 3 ECOMs on the final shuttle mission.
And you're watching NASA TV.